The courtroom fell silent. Not a whisper, not a breath. Even the soft rustle of paper from the clerk's desk seemed to stop in anticipation. Every eye locked on the man standing calmly at the podium. He wore a faded navy uniform with a school district patch stitched onto the chest, his posture upright, expression steady, neither nervous nor proud, just centered. Judge Frank Caprio squinted at the case file in front of him, then glanced up over his glasses. "Denzel Washington?" he asked, raising an amused brow. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom like a breeze. "Like the actor?" Judge Caprio chuckled, his tone light, teasing, trying to mask his curiosity with a touch of sarcasm. The man cracked a small smile. "Yes, sir, that's what it says on my license. But I assure you, my Oscar's still in the mail." Even the bailiff grinned, but what happened next would freeze the smirks in place and command the full, undivided attention of everyone in that room. Because this Denzel Washington, no relation to Hollywood royalty, wasn't here to ask for sympathy. He wasn't here to make excuses, and he certainly wasn't here to be anyone's punchline. He came armed with facts, with pages of printed city policy, handwritten notes, and case references. He came not just to dispute a parking ticket, but to challenge the very foundation of how it was issued. As the minutes ticked by, something changed in Judge Caprio's demeanor. The light-hearted tone faded, replaced by something deeper: respect. This was no ordinary defendant. Denzel Washington, a former janitor turned community advocate, methodically dissected the citation. He pointed out inconsistencies in signage placement, referred to outdated enforcement codes still in effect from before the 2008 zoning reform, and even highlighted a recent city council motion that most people, even seasoned attorneys, might have overlooked. Each point he made was clear, calm, and confidently delivered. Not to show off, but to shine a light on how the system, when left unchecked, quietly punishes the people it's meant to serve. He didn't speak with arrogance. He spoke with purpose, with lived experience, with the quiet fury of someone who had spent years watching friends and neighbors lose their licenses, their jobs, their dignity. Not because they were criminals, but because they couldn't afford a $65 mistake. He told stories about mothers who walked 2 miles to the hospital at 5 a.m. because their car was towed over an expired tag. About fathers who missed work shifts after overnight tickets they couldn't even read in the dark. About people like him, who stayed late to clean schools, only to be fined for where they had to park while doing it. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. His smile was gone now, not out of offense but contemplation. For perhaps the first time that day, he wasn't just hearing a case, he was listening to a message. Because what started as a harmless joke, a courtroom chuckle over a familiar name, had transformed into a masterclass in civic awareness. A living lesson in the power of education, even without a degree. This wasn't Denzel the janitor. This was Denzel the citizen. Denzel the advocate. Denzel the symbol of what quiet brilliance looks like when it walks into a room and refuses to shrink. And as he finished, you could feel it. That shift. The murmurs faded. The weight of his words lingered like smoke. Even the prosecutor sat still, pen frozen above his notepad. There are moments in Judge Caprio's courtroom that rise above the letter of the law, moments where humanity, grit, and courage eclipse technicalities and fines. This was one of them. Stay with us as we follow Denzel's journey, from underestimated to unforgettable. Because in this courtroom, sometimes the most powerful voice doesn't come from the bench, but from the people who dared to speak truth to it. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, the kind where gray clouds hang low and raindrops patter steadily against courthouse windows like nature's metronome. Outside, umbrellas bobbed along the sidewalk, and the city moved with its usual mix of routine and resignation. But inside the small municipal courtroom of Judge Frank Caprio, the air buzzed with a different kind of energy. The scent of wet coats and fresh coffee hung in the air. A handful of spectators, Regulars who showed up just for the stories shuffled in their seats. The clerk tapped away at her keyboard, and the bailiff gave a small nod as the next name echoed through the courtroom speakers. Clerk, next up, Denzel Washington. A murmur of chuckles rippled through the benches. Even a couple of heads turned with curiosity. Judge Caprio, smiling as he looks up from the file. All right, let's see here. Denzel Washington? From the back of the courtroom, a man rose and made his way to the podium. Mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn but clean school maintenance uniform with the Providence Public Schools patch neatly sewn above the heart. His walk was calm, deliberate. Not defiant, not apologetic, just steady. Denzel, with a modest smile, "Yes, sir, that's me. But no relation to the movie star, unfortunately, though I do get some free coffee now and then." The courtroom chuckled again. Even the stenographer smiled behind her keyboard. Judge Caprio, chuckling. "Well, I was about to ask for an autograph. You might be disappointing some folks today." Denzel, grinning. "Unless you want one from a school custodian, Your Honor. In that case, I'm very famous. To sixth graders. They think I walk on water when I fix the vending machine." Laughter spreads, easing the room. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. The judge had seen thousands of faces pass through his courtroom, but every once in a while someone walked in who carried more than just a citation. There was a presence about Denzel. Not loud or flashy, but something honest. Judge Caprio, playfully but warm. "Well, Mr. Washington, welcome. Let's take a look at why you're gracing our courtroom today. I'm guessing it's not for Best Actor in a legal drama." More light laughter. The judge turned back to the case file and flipped a few pages with interest. The laughter faded, but a lingering sense of curiosity remained. Something about this man made people sit up just a little straighter. It wasn't just the name. It was the way he stood, composed and unshaken, like he had something more to say, and people were ready to listen. The rain continued its rhythm outside, but inside, all eyes were now on Denzel. Not the actor, not the punchline, but a man whose story was about to unfold in ways no one expected. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and glanced back down at the folder in front of him. Judge Caprio, reading, "All right, Mr. Washington. Looks like you have 3 parking violations here. 2 for parking in a residential zone without a permit, and 1 for an expired meter. That all adds up to $140. He looked up, waiting. Denzel, nodding respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm not disputing the tickets, but I would like to explain why those violations happened, if I may." Judge Caprio gestured with an open hand. Judge Caprio, "You may. That's what we're here for. Let's start with the residential zone ones." Denzel, "Both of those were issued during my night shifts at George B. West Middle School. That's the school across from the residential zone. Their parking lot gets full pretty quick when we have late maintenance jobs, especially when other crews are in. I parked on the street both nights, left a note on the dash saying I was school staff, but I guess that didn't count for much." Judge Caprio, "The meter maids aren't known for their sentimentality." Denzel, with a faint smile, "No, sir, but I respect their consistency." Scattered laughter from the courtroom. Judge Caprio, with a slight grin, "All right, that's fair. What about the expired meter?" Denzel, a little more cautiously, "That one was a Saturday morning. I was at City Hall." Judge Caprio paused, brow lifting slightly. Judge Caprio, "City Hall? On a weekend?" Denzel, "Yes, sir. I've been attending legal literacy seminars. The library sponsors them, and sometimes they're hosted in City Hall's basement conference rooms. That morning's session was on housing rights and municipal enforcement. It ran over. By the time I got back to my car, the meter was blinking red and the ticket was waiting for me." Judge Caprio's expression shifted. His teasing tone softened. Judge Caprio, "You're studying law?" Denzel, shrugging humbly. "Trying to understand it. I'm not going to law school or anything. Can't afford that. But I'm working with a local project. We've had a lot of folks in my neighborhood, elderly, low income, getting ticketed unfairly. Sometimes it's signage issues, sometimes enforcement just hits one block over and over. I wanted to learn how to advocate, at least get the right paperwork in people's hands before things spiral. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes never leaving Denzel. His tone changed, less judge, more citizen. Judge Caprio, genuinely intrigued. Now you've got my attention. The room, once filled with small chuckles and casual murmurs, had quieted. Denzel didn't come across as boastful. There was no performance, just steady conviction from a man who had clearly lived what he spoke. Judge Caprio folded his hands in front of him and looked thoughtful, like he wasn't just considering the fine anymore, but the man behind the ticket. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the bench, his voice more gentle now. Judge Caprio, you said you're a school custodian. Is that your main work? Denzel nodded. Denzel, yes, sir. I've been doing that for about 18 years now. Before that, I worked construction, framing, drywall, anything I could get my hands on. But then I had a back injury on a site in Cranston. Took me out for months. When I recovered, I knew I couldn't keep up with that kind of physical strain. I took the custodial job because it was stable, and it came with benefits. Judge Caprio looked up from the folder, sensing there was more. Judge Caprio, benefits? Denzel's voice dropped just slightly. He didn't rush. He didn't dramatize. Denzel, my son, Elijah, he was born with a congenital heart defect. We didn't know until he was 3 weeks old. He had his first surgery before he turned 6 months. He's had 3 in total. The last one was 2 years ago. Judge Caprio, softly, I'm very sorry to hear that. Denzel cleared his throat gently. The courtroom was completely still. Denzel, it's been a long road, Your Honor. There were nights in the pediatric ICU where I didn't think we'd bring him home. When he was 5, we almost lost him to an infection after his second surgery. I started staying up late reading everything I could about healthcare laws, insurance codes, anything that could help me fight the denials and delays. We were drowning in medical bills. $800 here, $1,200 there. And every time I called the insurance line, it felt like I was walking blindfolded through a maze. He paused. A faint tremor passed through his voice, quickly steadied. Denzel, continuing, that's how I started reading legal materials, just to survive. I figured if I could understand even a little of the law, I could make the system work for my boy. Eventually, I started helping other parents, explaining terms, helping them write appeals. And now I help folks in my neighborhood who are facing eviction or fines they can't fight. Judge Caprio, quietly after a long pause. That's remarkable, Mr. Washington. Denzel shrugged, almost embarrassed by the attention. Denzel, I just believe, if you give people knowledge, you give them a chance. Most folks I know, they're not looking to beat the system. They're just trying to survive it. I don't have a fancy degree, but I care, and I've seen firsthand what unfair enforcement can do. One parking ticket might seem small, but if it leads to a suspended license, and then you miss work, the dominoes fall fast. There was a soft murmur from the benches. A woman in the back dabbed her eyes. Even the clerk had paused her typing. Judge Caprio studied the man in front of him. A janitor by trade, a father by devotion, and an advocate by necessity. There was no pretense in Denzel's words, just truth, earned one hardship at a time. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Denzel with a quiet admiration. His voice, when it came, carried both the weight of the bench and the warmth of a grandfather who had just been humbled by someone younger and wiser. Judge Caprio, smiling thoughtfully. Mr. Washington, you walked into this courtroom with $140 in fines, and I'll be honest, when I saw your name on the docket, I had a few jokes ready. Denzel Washington? I thought we might get a little Hollywood today. A ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom. Judge Caprio, soft chuckle, but I didn't expect to get a lesson in civic responsibility from a school janitor. Denzel, modestly, almost bashfully, "Just doing my part, sir." Judge Caprio shook his head, slowly and with a smile that reached his eyes. Judge Caprio, "More than that, you've reminded us, and I do mean all of us, what justice should look like. Not just rules written in ink, but compassion written in action." He tapped the folder in front of him gently, then closed it. Judge Caprio, with finality, "Here's what I'm going to do. The residential zone tickets, I'm dismissing them both. You were performing necessary work for a public school, during night hours, during a crisis. You even left a note. That tells me you weren't looking to dodge the rules, just doing your job when no one else wanted to be there." Denzel, quietly, with a nod, "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Caprio, "The expired meter. Well, I have to admit, studying municipal law on a Saturday isn't exactly how most people spend their weekends. But what you were doing, learning, advocating, preparing to help your neighbors, that's something special. I'm reducing that fine to a warning." Denzel, smiling, almost relieved, "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Judge Caprio's tone turned warm but firm, like a coach giving final advice before the whistle. Judge Caprio, "But I'll ask something in return. Keep using that brilliant mind of yours. Keep showing up for people who don't know how to show up for themselves. Our city needs more advocates, especially ones who know what it means to scrub a hallway clean before the bell rings." Denzel, "I will, sir. I promise." Judge Caprio leaned in, eyes twinkling. Judge Caprio, with a grin, "And if you ever decide to take the bar exam, let me know. I'll be in the front row, cheering you on." The room erupted in light applause and warm laughter. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. Denzel bowed his head slightly, overcome for just a moment, then offered a quiet thank you again before stepping away from the podium. As he walked back to his seat, a few members of the audience patted his shoulder. One woman whispered, "God bless you." Another man mouthed, "Well done." And Judge Caprio sat there for a moment longer, watching the man who had just reminded everyone why compassion still has a place in a courtroom. In a courtroom where thousands come seeking justice, some leave behind something more. Denzel Washington didn't just win a case, he won respect. He didn't wear a tie or bring a lawyer. What he carried was harder to find: dignity, quiet courage, and a heart full of purpose. He reminded us that wisdom can wear work boots and carry a mop, and still be sharper than any suit in the room. In a world that often overlooks the working class, Denzel stood tall, not because he raised his voice, but because he raised the bar. He showed that understanding the law isn't just for scholars in ivory towers, but for anyone with the patience to read and the will to fight for what's fair. Judge Caprio, known for his warmth and wit, once tried to lighten the moment with a joke, but in the end he stood humbled by a man who came not to plead, but to uplift. A man who turned a parking ticket into a platform for justice. One citation, one courtroom, one powerful reminder that justice, at its best, sees not just the letter of the law, but the life behind it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment below, especially if you believe everyone deserves a chance to be heard. Wherever you're watching from, remember, justice isn't about power, it's about humanity. Subscribe now for more unforgettable moments from the courtroom of Judge Frank Caprio, where compassion is the rule, not the exception.